Hello, everyone. Guess who? It's us. We're back for season five. Season five. Last
Can
week,
you believe it?
I can't believe
Hi,
it.
everybody.
It's been 5 years. Hi, everyone. We're back for the fifth time. We're back for the first time. You watched Bree and us talk a little bit last week about all the things that we are excited about for this season, and this is one of those things. Being here today to talk to Two Dance Moms, the host of Two Dance Moms podcast. We're so happy to have them back. If you are joining us for the first time here in season five, I don't know how that could possibly be, but if you are, welcome. This is Beyond the Steps. We are a weekly video podcast that talks about everything performance athletics, from nutrition, psychology, dance medicine and science, which dance is our roots, dance medicine and science, sex abuse and prevention, racism, gender equity, you name it. We tackle the big topics and we talk to experts with amazing perspectives about all of these issues each week. You can find us on YouTube, which is probably where you are right now, or Facebook, and make sure that you tag your friends, call your friends, email your friends, and let them know the show is on right now and to watch. We have such a great show for you that I think some of our performance athletic youth parents might be super interested in. We're going to talk about some tips and strategies when you feel pressure to keep up with other families on your team. That keeping up with the
Mhm.
Joneses thing,
That is real. That
it
is
is
so
real.
real.
It is
Yeah.
real. And it's real on every single team. You're always looking like, should I be doing that? Should I not be doing that? Can I even do that? Is that something that we can financially even figure out? Am I going to be pulling lint out of the bottom of my purse trying to figure out how to pay for this stuff just to keep up with these other families? So we are talking to Amira Azimi and Casey Day from the Two Dance Moms podcast today. They are seasoned dance moms who have probably had a good amount of experience with this either themselves or through their network of other dance parents. And we are so excited to tackle this topic today. I totally forgot, and it's not my heart, it is totally my head, to introduce my amazing co-host Bree Zabrowski from Apollo Performance.
Hi.
She's also
Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. One of the things that we are going to be doing. So, Casey and Amira were with us last season in season 4. They're a valued partner of Apollo. We're so excited to be working with them, but we loved chatting with them so much that we decided in season 5 that we're going to bring them back every quarter to give us sort of that parent perspective that they do so well. And we're going to be chatting with them once a quarter on this show this season. So you're going to see them a little bit more. If you aren't familiar with them, you need to go get familiar with them. They are the hosts of a weekly podcast sharing their own wins and fails as dance moms with the tips and tricks they've learned along the way, helping dance parents find a little more fun and a little less stress at their dancers' next competition. Casey is a fitness trainer, wife to a firefighter, and mom to 3, 2 boys and 1 girl. And Amira is a proud parent of 2 kiddos, a very athletic 12-year-old son, and an energetic 10-year-old competitive dancer located in SoCal. And both of you, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
We're really
Thank you
excited
so
to
much
be
for
here.
having us. We love coming on this podcast. Thanks. We're excited. We're going to be coming back through the year.
Yeah, it's fun to have you guys to kind of commiserate with. And for anybody out there hearing dance, don't change that channel, because everything we talk about the show is applicable to any performance athlete, insert any sport. We tend to err towards things that are affecting youth. And we're always open to hearing topics that you want to discuss as well, or things that you're curious about. So we'll talk about that later. But with that, Casey and Amira, Two Dance Moms is really taking off. You guys have just sort of reached this tipping point, and it's really exciting to see. What new and exciting things do you have on the horizon, and what can you share with us this season?
Thanks, Bree. We're super excited. This kind of just all fell into our dance mom laps, and we just kind of thought we would chat about stuff we were spending like an hour a day chatting about on the phone. that related to dance. So we were kind of surprised that people wanted to listen. And we've just been trying to catch up to the interest. And we're super grateful for partnerships with you guys, Apollo Performance. And we're super grateful for all the listeners. So we just launched season 3 last month. And we have some super exciting episodes in the pipeline. We have actually had both of you, Melissa and Bree, interviewed, and going to be a new episode on the podcast. And we just finished last week. We had Jason Pickett on the podcast and some other really exciting guests. You may notice if you're listening to the podcast, we have new microphones, new equipment. So that was a big, exciting thing for us. We started just with what we kind of had at home, and we now have upgraded. And so we sound a little better. So lots of exciting stuff. And we're really happy to be here talking with you guys today.
Well, congratulations on what is sure to be another wonderful season. Really proud of you guys, really excited for you. And just thrilled to partner with you guys for another year. So very, very cool. We look forward to listening.
Yes, absolutely. And when I was on the show, I recorded my show with them. I was like, wow, you sound great. Please send me the link to those microphones. So y'all are definitely going to hear the difference in the
Agreed. I see the same thing. Yeah, they sound fantastic.
They do. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm a football mom. Y'all are never planning to be a football mom. I'm a dance teacher, been one for 20 plus years. Never planned to be a football mom, but here I am, killing it. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel so much pressure, even as a football mom. I can't even imagine what it's like as a dance mom. But the pressure that I feel is usually around, like, should I be bringing the team snacks? Have I signed up for enough concessions slots, volunteer slots? Because there's, one mom that's always packing these little goodie bags, beat the Cougars, at the end of every game, and she gives them out. And I'm like, okay, I barely made it here. I don't think I should have packed.
I'm hanging on by a thread. I'm here. I showed up.
I barely made it here. So what are the top 3 areas do you think that in dance that parents tend to feel pressure?
Oh, see, I can totally relate. I was also a football mom. Like you said, Bree, I have 2 older sons before I had my daughter. And so they played basketball, played football. And so it all is the same. No matter what sport you're in, it translates across all the different styles. But for dance, I think it is a very expensive activity, and fundraising can be one of the spaces where you can feel a lot of pressure to participate, to try and come up with things that are going to help the team earn money. It's really difficult because most studios, you don't get to have a 501, and with some teams you can. So it's a lot more challenging on how you raise money. Everybody's always got an idea like, oh, let's do this. We can't do that. We're not a 501. Mm-hmm. So depending on what kind of a team, and it's just a lot to get involved. And then everybody's like, well, did we even make enough money? So fundraising is definitely one. I think number 2 is going to be props. If you have a studio that does big production pieces or just props within their group dances, there need to be people that make the props. And there need to be people that haul the props and unload the props. And, props is a big one if you have any. And then I think the last thing where people want to kind of need to keep up is with information. And sometimes it's almost like a race to who can get the information quick enough and who can share it with everybody. Like, oh, I know when this is happening. Let me tell you. And you're like, oh, wait, am I behind? Am I behind on the ball? I didn't get, the schedule or figure out when that thing is. So those are the areas I think in dance where we see some of that parent kind of pressure to keep up.
I think for me, all of those things ring so true. Having sat on both sides of it as a director and as a parent, I think another big one is training. So like your training opportunities for your athlete, like you think you're doing it, and then you hear about something else that you didn't know about. And I know better. I mean, that's like, I'm a walking I'm just full of hypocrisy, because I have said these things in dance for years and I can spot it a mile away. But when I'm in it with my own kid, I am just as guilty as everybody else. And it's terrible. Like, the only advantage that I have at this point is that I can check myself. Like, I am out of body looking down going, you are doing this. And I can pull myself back. But it is really easy to slip into it, even when you're aware of the pitfalls. And I think training is one of those things that, insert any, private training or skills camp or dance convention, that, maybe you only know what you know as a parent, and then you hear from other parents that they did X, Y, and Z, and you're like, oh, my kid missed out. Now their kid did this, and their kid's going to be further ahead, and I didn't give my kid the right opportunities. And you're just constantly beating yourself up about, and you only know what you know. And I think we said this a lot, and Amira and Casey, I know we've talked about this on your show. That's where two things become really important, is that open line of communication between the parents. And instead of keeping each other at arm's length, we bring each other together and link elbows, but also where that strong leadership and communication comes from the director. And I think because parents only know so much, they're relying so heavily on that person at the top to teach them and share and bring them information. And sometimes you see studios not wanting their kids to have those outside training opportunities. And so they pull it close to the vest. And so that's where I think we tend to go wrong in this industry a little bit. And it becomes it kind of feeds that keeping up with the Joneses instead of tamping it down. Does that make sense?
Right. I agree. I think like the whole social media aspect of it too just heightens it all. But it isn't
you see
unique.
A story, and you see you're like, where's that?
Right.
What is that? What's going on over there?
How did they get there? They didn't know. Oh wait, I missed
right. Yeah, and it's not unique just to dance.
No.
My son is on like a very competitive soccer team, and it's always who you're training with, how many times you're training. And, there definitely is sort of a rat race aspect to it that, we'll get more into it down later in the episode. I think there's factors that really heighten that race a little bit more, but it's not exclusive to dance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the pressures are different at different age levels? Like, do you think, I think as a teacher, I see it in the younger kids more so than the older kids. And because by the time they get older, they're driving themselves. The moms are like, whatever.
Well, the kids are old enough to start, when they get to a certain age, they're old enough to start researching things on their own, and they hear things from their friends, and they start finding, and they can come home and say, I want to do this, right?
Mm-hmm. We actually felt, so Casey and I were kind of talking about this, and I do not think that there are necessarily different pressures at different ages. I think it more or less relates to time doing this sport. So for example, my dancer is a relatively younger dancer, but I feel like she's been doing it now. She's going on her 7th year on a team. So the pressures are less for us now because we kind of went through that peak. I think Casey said there's like a bell curve, right? So there was a year where we were like, we got to keep up. We got to do this. And I think their skills are building and their interest. They may have had like a taste of success. So then they want to we got to get better. And this person did this. But now at this point, maybe past the 5-year mark, I feel like my daughter's not dancing herself, but I feel like we've kind of been able to sit back and be like, her journey is unique and what she is going to want to do is going to be unique. And it doesn't matter what the person next to her is doing.
And I think you also have to look at your kid. Like, you have to know who your kid is and where their line is. And every kid has a different line. And as far as how much they can tolerate and how much they can handle and how much they can be pushed. Like, I have a kid that very much loves he needs time at home to decompress. And so I can't overbook him. I can't overcommit him or he will lose it. Right. And my daughter's, a little bit opposite of that. And so I think it's just, you have to know the kid that you're dealing with too. And it's not all a one size fits all type thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So how much of the pressure do you guys think is self-imposed, and how much comes from other families or from a studio environment or from society as a whole? You mentioned social media. Is all of this self-imposed, or does it come from those outside stressors?
I think it's mostly self-imposed, but I think the access to the outside influences of social media, we are the ones that are in charge of what we see, what our eyes are exposed to based on how much time we have ourselves in front of the phone and who we're following.
Mm-hmm.
And, the amount of influence that we put, the amount of value that we place on social media and watching what everybody else is doing, it's going to affect how we feel inside. And exactly what you were saying before, Bree, it's remembering to focus on our child and their specific needs rather than what someone else is doing for their child. Because somebody might be taking their kid to whatever this training camp is, or to, ballet intensive. My child may not want to pursue ballet. They may want to be an industry dancer. So that would be a waste of time and money for me. And I don't want to look at what somebody else is doing and try to impose that upon my child. That's not their path. And so, I think we really have to be diligent to guard how much we're watching other people and how that makes us feel, or just evaluate it. Maybe it's fine. Maybe we are inspired by it and it's good and it's healthy. But there is a point where we can watch what other people are doing on social media, and it can affect us in a way that's not necessarily healthy and make us want to make choices that aren't necessarily right for our kid.
Yeah. I think there's a very fine line. I love that point of healthy competition and keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like when I was growing up, I had a really good friend of mine that we danced together. And when we were very opposite in terms of personality and the way that we presented ourselves on stage, and people would put us together for that reason. But when she was next to me, I would dance harder than I've ever danced, and same with her. And it was wonderful. And we just had this chemistry that frankly, I haven't had much since then. You don't find it often. And I think I'm seeing the same thing with my son, playing with certain people push him harder in soccer. It pushes him harder to be better. But then, you go one step further and you cross that line of okay, now this is not healthy. He doesn't just because he's not doing X, Y, and Z doesn't mean he's not doing well and he's not being successful. It's just, what does that look like in your mind, and reframing that picture of success. Right. So I love that you guys said that.
Yeah.
My daughter has that person in her class right now. And it's her motivation, and they encourage each other. They're buddies. They
for sure. Now, when it's
to inspire.
Yeah, when it's Tanya Harding style, that's a different story.
But
and now I'm aging myself. But we don't want to go there. But if it's a healthy, supportive competition and it pushes you to be better, that's what we're looking for, and that's what you want to foster and encourage. For those just joining, this is Beyond the Steps. This is the show we talk about all things that affect performance athletes. We're chatting with our friends Mira Azimi and Casey Day from Two Dance Moms podcast today about some tips and strategies to use when you feel pressured to keep up with the Joneses, to keep up with those other families on your team. Insert any sport or activity. It all applies. I think we can all relate. So be sure it's not too late to go back, watch this from the beginning, catch up, and follow us at the handles below. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps us push the episode out there. So we're going to go into the next segment, and I come across this all the time. A family wants their child in every routine, and this is so appropriate because we just recorded this episode for your guys' podcast yesterday. They want, every routine, 2 solos, 3 duos and trio, whatever, and they don't have the financial resources to cover it all. They end up in debt, stressed, and even worse, having to quit middle of the season. You don't see it often, but they get in some hot water with a lot of the bills that come with these activities. Have you ever seen this happen in your dance community? And what was the fallout for the team the family and the child. And I'm going to let you guys go first and then share some stories on this too.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, we have never had anybody pull out when competitions have started. Anytime people have pulled out, it has been in that early days when choreography is still being set. And our studio does a really good job of sending out like estimated prices for every competition. Like we've already gotten it. We have an idea of how much our costumes are going to cost.
Sure.
All of that stuff is given to us early on. And so we tend to see some parents that will pull out kind of in that early stage when choreography is still being set. And all of a sudden these numbers start arriving and it's their first year and they're like, oh my goodness, you know, thankfully it's early on. We definitely have people that have gone through the whole season and realize they bit off more than they could chew, because it is, you want your kid to be in all the dances. They're having so much fun and it's this great experience and we're loving it.
It's intoxicating. It's like the whole experience. You're bonding with your child, you're connecting with other moms, and it feels like your little village and it's so fun. And you know, you get wrapped up in it all. Like you just totally get swept away. I've seen it. I've been in it. I get it.
Yeah. You know, we see a lot of people that go through that first year, the honeymoon year, and they're all excited and they're like, give me more. Yeah, whatever we can have. And then the next year the bill hits and they're playing catch up. And you see a lot of parents that will cut back and they're like, no, not that, less dances, no solo. They've got to make adjustments because they overdid it the first year. And then they have to recalibrate the second year. We have a whole episode on budgeting, and I plan my budget out for dance at the beginning of the year. And I estimate all my numbers from the year before and go, okay, how much can we afford this year? How many dances can we do? And we got to look at it realistically on a month to month budget basis. Like this is a part of my monthly budget. It's dance. And it's a big part.
Because you have no idea how many times it happened where it was like people were just like this, like, I don't want to know, like, here's my card. And then at the end of the year, they would come up and ask for like an itemized receipt for everything they paid for taxes and all the things they were doing. And they're like, my husband didn't know how much we were paying for dance. And we looked at it and now we're like, I've even had people that are, I mean, I don't advise this in any stretch, but like, I just don't tell my husband how much I'm putting on the card. I just pay it off. And I was like, but I think giving that estimate at the beginning of the season is so clutch because it really does give people a full understanding of the picture rather than hitting them mid-season. And that's really what you want, right? I don't want to say you want to weed anybody out, but if they're going to pull out, it needs to be at the beginning so that they can get their money back too, before it's too late to issue refunds and the work has been all the way completed and, you know, choreography's paid for and all the things. Costumes are done. There's nothing you can do about it. Like there's so many things that you want to make sure that people don't step into those landmines, right?
Dance is like, it's like ordering on an a la carte menu, and each thing isn't that expensive. You're like, yes, let's do this one thing. Let's go to this intensive. Let's add on this private lesson. But then when you get to the end of the year and you add up how much you actually spent.
Well, it's really easy too, because a lot, especially when you get to the competitive level, you know, travel is not factored into, or it hasn't been in any activity that I've been part of, certainly not dance, where, you know, I always put big, bold letters highlighted, like this does not include hotel expenses, you know, gas, food, like air travel, if it's required, like none of that is factored in. And when you add that up, that's a couple grand more, you know, easily. On top of that bill. And so I think that's really what bites people, you know.
Well, not to add to the mix, but I'm just thinking like gear across both sports for my kids. Okay, let's not even get started on like dance wear and, you know, all the accessories, having that. And then with soccer, you know, your cleats, we're looking at $200 to $300 cleats for turf, artificial grass, and regular grass, and a practice pair. So that whole component, keeping up with that does apply too, because they want to be wearing the best cleats and the best dance wear. And
you want them to be
get caught up in that.
And it's also a lot of this stuff is like paid in monthly installments, or it's paid like, I know in soccer, like we paid the whole fee for the season up front. So it very much feels like, oh, we've got this all taken care of. So to do an extra this or an extra that, or go to an extra convention, oh, what's another couple hundred? But then you start adding it up at the end of the season and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Yeah.
Right. So it is, when we talk about keeping up with the Joneses and that mentality, it is, which I don't know where Joneses came from. Does anyone
I don't
know
have
where
to
that-
look it up.
No, like who are the
we need to
Joneses?
find that out. I don't even know.
Why are we
Yeah.
keeping up with them? And speaking of
Keeping up with
Joneses,
them.
Who are the Joneses?
Who are the Joneses?
Oh, we lost Melissa. But anyway, yeah, I think that she'll be in a second. But I think that it's so important to really, check yourself and make sure that you're staying within your means and what your family can afford while still satisfying the commitment of the program. Do you guys think that keeping up, that sort of like inclination to keep up with other families ever impacts the child's experience in said sport?
100%.
You do.
100%. So there's the financial impact to the family, which thereby affects the child, number one. Number two, I think, is like this imbalance of family priorities really affects that healthy, happy balance you have with the other members of your family. So if their lives revolve around this sport that they're doing, and thereby their calendars are completely commanded by this sport, there's no other time for like happy interactions with your family, for like traditions you do, or just relaxing and, growing together. And so I think that is a really big drawback that affects a child. Probably more so even than that is what we are teaching our kids. When we are constantly keeping up with the Joneses and feeling this pressure and caving into it, we're teaching our kids that is a priority, that they need to compare themselves to what all these other people are doing, what these dancers are doing, what these soccer players are doing. And there's this quote I love so much that I see over and over again, and I've actually written and put on my daughter's board and on my son's in his room. And it's a Teddy Roosevelt quote. You've probably heard it before, but it's comparison is the thief of joy. And I just love it because I think it's very easy with social media, with their friends, to compare themselves constantly. And I think as parents, we have to sort of temper our pressures we're putting on ourselves to keep up, because then our children won't feel it as much. And we don't want them to grow up feeling like they need to compare, themselves, because they'll never be happy. You're never going to be, there's always going to be somebody better than you.
Yeah, that is
find them on social media.
Yeah, that's a really, really great reminder for me right now. That is wonderful. So while we're waiting for Melissa to jump back in, there can definitely be differences in resources, financial time, between families, right? What advice would you give to families who feel a little bit overwhelmed by the expectation to keep up?
I would tell them to reprioritize. I would say like scale back and bring it back to the basics. Like focus on what brought your child joy in their sports and stop like overwhelming yourself with the additional add-ons that come with that. I think that if you bring it back to just those basics and you stop what you're doing and you take a break and you reprioritize, I think it really becomes clear where you want to focus the energy for your athlete, your dancer, your stage performer, whatever it may be. You have to like find what brought them joy in the beginning and take it back to that. And I think that that's sort of a way of reestablishing what matters to you and your child.
And making sure your child knows like we're doing everything we can to support you. And I think that's where it becomes really important too. Like you guys were sharing, like, your kids volunteering and doing things, like it's okay to let your kid know, like they need to, that this is we have these conversations all the time. Like we never want our kids to feel guilty that but we want them to have a respect for the amount of time and money that we are putting forth as a family to support their their passions and their dreams
Right.
and what that requires of the entire family, not just them. And so it's always a reminder of like, don't take this for granted. Be super thankful that you get to do this. Right. So,
right. We want them to appreciate it. But I think, I've seen families take an entire year off to scale back and like take it down to basics. And I think it's important for us to remember, no matter what the sport, we can like pick it back up again. They can take a year off, save some money, and then go back in with the things that brought them joy, the things that matter most. And I think sometimes it takes that break to know where to put your energy and your resources.
Yeah. No, I love that thought. If you're just watching, this is Beyond the Steps. We're chatting with Amira Azimi and Casey Day of Two Dance Moms podcast, and we're talking about tips and strategies to use when you feel pressure to keep up with the other families on your team, that keeping up with the Joneses bites the best of us. And so we're talking about that today. It is a very real thing. And, it's something that I think we all have to really check ourselves on the regular to make sure that we're not falling into that trap. We are so excited to have you watching. This is season 5 of Beyond the Steps. It's not too late. Go back and watch this episode from the beginning, and you can watch all of our episodes on YouTube and Facebook at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations. So make sure you do that and give us a follow, like, share, subscribe, and comment. Melissa, let's jump into our third segment, because I know we have more to dive into.
Yes, absolutely. So balance is key. That's what they say. Balance. You must always be balanced. That is the key word. How do you think, or what do you think is a healthy way to achieve balance between your child's progress and not trying to keep up with other families? So like, you want them to progress. You want them to go to these things, but you have to balance what they can do with what you want. Your wants and your needs always in this life seem to be competing. So how do you think, what's a good way to balance that?
I would say twofold. Number one, knowing your child, knowing what their goals are specifically. And that way you're not going to be distracted by all the other options that present themselves that maybe aren't necessary. Mm-hmm. So you know where your kid wants to go. You know what their focus is, their interests lie. They have a direct path to that. And we can do our part as the parent to find those resources, those opportunities, and then we can cut out the unnecessary ones that are distracting. Yeah, maybe, little Susie's going to this other convention. You don't need to go to that one because you've got this other thing, and that's our path right now. That's what suits your goals and your, desired destination, at least for now. Kids change their interests as they grow older and understand themselves better. But I think that's one thing. I think number 2 is finding other resources financially that fit into what you can do, your capacity. So maybe you can only go to one convention, one outside thing. But you know what? We're going to do this online subscription to help work on your conditioning or to work on your flexibility or whatnot. There are options for your kid to continue their progress that fit within your budget, your travel, all of those things. There's so many resources out there. So you can continue to push. And Bree, to what you were saying earlier, like the kids have to invest as well. We said this with my sons. They were doing, travel basketball. We always told them, hey, we're investing X amount financially, time-wise, weekends, all of it. You have to invest on your side the same. Mm-hmm. The effort has to match what mom and dad, what the parents, whoever is funding this endeavor.
Yeah.
The kid has to be able to match on their energy, their ability to practice and discipline themselves to invest their own time. So.
Yeah. And I think it's a struggle because, they're human and they get tired and, they're just like adults, right? Like they not every day they're going to be at full capacity and full energy, but there's a difference between being tired and doing your best that day to like, if I hear I don't want to go, like, thank God I'm not hearing that from my son. But like, if that's kind of my metric, like if I start hearing like, I don't want to go, I wish I didn't have soccer today, if I hear those words, that's going to make me rethink real quick what we're doing here. And he knows that. He's very aware of that. And I told him, like, if you ever get to that point, it's okay, but you just need to be honest. And because I am very well aware of burnout, and I'm very well aware that that is a very real thing, and it starts younger and younger these days, especially when you have a child that, you know, there's a lot of discussion, and I'm sure this is for another episode on another day, of like, what age is the right age to fully commit to a sport? You know, there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of perspective that show that, you know, kids should be multiple, you know, shouldn't be committing to one thing, you know, as at 11, 12 years old, they should be doing multiple sports and multiple activities. But, you know, you look at we're talking about keeping up with the Joneses and resources and all of those things. I quite honestly, like, I don't have a kid that wants to do those things. We've asked, and he's, you know, he does clubs at school and he gets involved in certain ways, but soccer is like his primary sport, and he doesn't really want to play anything else. But I often look at families that are doing that, and I'm like, not only do I not understand how you're doing this, like getting your kids, multiple kids, everywhere they need to go, and then still working and having your house functioning. But then how are you affording this, you know, is the other, like, I you know, and I genuinely just don't know how people do it. It's I marvel at it. And I marveled at it when I was in the one making the rules and setting the prices, and like, you know, having families pay mortgage payments for dance every month, going, I don't know that I can ever do this.
Right.
You know,
or that you want to do it. And I think that,
right.
You know, part of that is also thinking about when you look at people and you go, how are y'all doing this? We don't know how they're doing it. And they could be doing all types of financially irresponsible things that could be making.
Sure. And that's part of it. It's like, you can't manage somebody's finances for them. Like,
right.
you could, right. You
right.
don't know all the ins and outs of that.
You don't know what they're doing. You might not want to do what they're doing. There might,
Sure.
I've known of second and third mortgages coming out on houses.
Yeah.
I've heard of unimaginable things happening to pay for dance. So I totally get you. Stay in your lane. Don't get that. What we say in our neighborhood, don't count other people's coins. That's their coins. Count your own coins.
That's actually great.
Yeah. What role do you think studio owners play in making sure the team environment is inclusive and minimizing the pressure to keep up?
I really think that studio owners and directors set the tone for how the dancers and their families will sort of cave or buy into the pressure they put on keeping up. You know, if the studios, if the directors are really, you know, into social media and how their dancers dances and the studio fare in posts or follows or likes or even placements in studios, then the kids themselves and their families are going to really prioritize these comparisons over what matters, which is their development, their learning, and their enjoyment. And I think if the directors and the studio owners and the teachers can find a way to focus on the individuality of the kids and their like individual strengths and weaknesses and how they're going to progress on these challenges that they have, then you are in a great studio and you are going to eliminate as much as you can that keeping up with the Jones pressure in your dancers and your dance families. We are with a great studio. I think that because it's small, we're able to have sort of individual focus and, you know, at times charts or things specific that the dancers need to work on. But I think that that's going to really depend on like teacher, coach, staff ratios to dancers or athletes. You know, if it's just too large, I think you're really limited. I'm curious, Melissa, how many dancers you have or had in your company and sort of what ratios you're looking at, because I do acknowledge that it's probably very difficult for studio staff to provide individual direction, but I think that really can eliminate some of this pressure that the dancers are feeling.
Yeah.
Well, and things like you don't even think about. So this was a policy. I actually got some flack on this as a director. So when we would go to competitions, or we would have, we did a certain amount of mandatory competitions and conventions, and then a certain amount were optional for those that wanted to pay for and do a little bit more. And then inevitably, I always had like a handful of people that would do more than that on their own. As long as it didn't conflict with dance, they were allowed. But anything on the mandatory or optional list was excused if they had to miss a rehearsal over the weekend to go to that event, right? So that was all laid out beforehand. But when we went to these competition, it was standard practice in our area, at least. And I know this is the case with many areas, where the studio directors will post, congratulations, so-and-so, 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 so-and-so on your win, and for, getting this award at this convention and this, and then posting all like the results of their scores and the awards they received and all of the things. And I really, I would do a blanket, so proud of all of our students for their hard work at this convention. And I think I did a couple times post the results, and then I started feeling really icky about it, because every optional, convention you start posting, there's not every kid can or will attend to those things. And all of a sudden you're basically calling out, these kids are doing more than you. And they're getting my attention and they're getting my praise. And it's not necessarily fair, because the backstory and why those kids can't do these other things could be a multitude of reasons. They don't have the resources or financially to attend. Maybe they're committed to other activities and they're working just as hard in their other activities that they don't want to go to another dance convention. And so there's a lot of things that fall into play there. And I just stopped doing it. And some of the parents were so upset that I was not announcing the results of our stuff on social media, and it wasn't public knowledge. And I was like, it never felt good to me. Right. So I think those sorts of subliminal messaging that can get to people too, is, you react to that. You see, well, I want my kid's name to be on that list, and I want my kid to get praise from the studio director or the choreographer or the teacher. Like, I need to be like them. Right. So stuff like that too. It's the little nuances that we don't necessarily always think about either.
Right. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So what do you think, we talked about it from the studio director's role, but how do we keep children from feeling left out or less equipped, from feeling less equipped than their teammates if they don't have the resources? Or on the flip side, how do you stop a kid from feeling superior to their teammates because they do have the resources?
I think it goes back to the age of the child, and it's going to differ depending on how old they are. When we have a younger child, if I want to keep them from feeling left out, then I am going to heavily limit the amount of social media access that they have.
Yeah.
Pause for effect.
Right.
It's a lot to process as a young child, their brain, and seeing everybody do these amazing things. And I think they have to learn that they're not going to be invited to everything, or that they can't go to everything, or that mom and dad can't afford everything. Like, we have to learn to say no. And that's an important part of life. We can't teach our children that they get everything they want, because it's going to be a rude awakening as they turn into adults and they think they can, do all the things. Learning to say no, and how we say no, and when, for what items in our life that we have to, choose not to do, is important, because we're raising adults. We're trying to train people to become healthy adults. And if we don't want our kids to go into excessive amounts of debt when they become adults, we need to teach them now that sometimes mom and dad, or whomever is paying for this, have to say no, and there have to be boundaries on what we can do. And so I think when they're little, keeping them off social media so that they don't feel awful all the time. And as they get older, just being very communicative about the realities of budgets, and like, this is just not realistic. And moving forward, I think for the child that is getting to do a lot of the things, that's a heavily parented role. You have to teach your child what they can and can't post if they have social media, and the way that they even phrase it or word it, or how they're talking to their friends about it, because it's very different to invite a friend and be like, oh, do you want to go to this thing with me, as compared to say like, oh yeah, I went to this thing. You know, it's a lot of it is in tone.
It's a really good approach to just, encourage your child, like, to keep what we're doing to yourself, and you do you, and worry about you, and we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to share it.
Mind your business.
Mind your business. Stay in your lane, right? And so I think that's a very good metric.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think though.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I do think there are, even though we all like have different abilities as far as like what we can afford and what we can do, if you have a child that's very motivated and like wants to do it, they're going to do it. Like, they're going to work hard and they're going to push themselves to get to those points. And I think, if they have that dream, they're going to work for it.
Yeah. And they should be rewarded for that.
Free content for them to access and whatnot. So it's, it's a tough situation. Yeah.
That's a good point. And they should be rewarded for that. But the reward is the work. The reward is the result. And that's what we try to tell the kids is like, you just show up and work hard, and you take every opportunity you're given with gratitude, no matter what that is. And you be humble and you don't talk about it. You just show up and the results will speak for themselves. And that's the reward. It's not bragging about it. It's not posting about it. It's not, and I think people really need to learn, like, the more successful you are, the more there's going to be a target on your back. And unfortunately, that is the reality of the world that we live in. Like, people say they're happy for you, but when competition and jealousy and all the things get involved, like it brings out the worst in people. And I think just putting your head down and remaining humble is a really good lesson for these kids. And you don't need to publicly blast everything that you're doing. And that's where social media becomes very, very dangerous as well, especially for young brains that aren't fully developed and can't process it. I can't even process it. And I'm in my 40s, so I can't imagine how we're going to trust that responsibility to teenagers that have all sorts of things flowing through their bodies and are going through so many changes.
It's not a safe and wise thing to do.
No.
I want us to definitely move to homework, because I think that there is a good amount of homework that people can do between now and next week. So you've been on the show before, so we give homework. What is one action that you would like for our listeners to take between now and next week to make progress in this area?
Spend some time with your family or your friends doing an activity that has absolutely nothing to do with your child's sport. Nothing, whether it's dance, football, soccer. Take them out of it, help them find joy in whatever it is you're doing, but have it be nothing to do with their sport.
I love that.
Balance.
Right. Balance and yep.
That's actually a really great idea for an episode.
Yep.
Talking about balance.
Got lots of suggestions.
How to achieve it. Maybe we'll have to make that our next topic.
Yeah, we have some open topics for the future. We got to throw that one in. Yes.
Yeah.
Balance. Thank you so much for that homework. We have our homework. It's been 5 seasons and this homework has not changed.
No.
Not one little bit has this homework changed. It's to take the STEPS initiative. The link is there on the screen for you. It is a totally free education module that gives you very, very important information. Not all the information you need, but definitely a great start around how to work with performance athletes, how to make this space safer, happier, and healthier from psychology standpoint, nutrition, dance medicine and science, racism, sex abuse and prevention, gender equity, you name it, it's in there. So please run to that link and take this and share it with your friends. Amira, Casey, how can people find you?
Well, we have a podcast and you can listen to it everywhere you find podcasts. Two Dance Moms podcast. We are also on Instagram at Two Dance Moms Podcast. And if you so desire, you can email us. We're actually starting a email question topic kind of on Fridays, occasional bonus episodes. So if you have a topic that you want us to talk about, you can send us a question or just we'll chit chat about it. So email twodancemoms@gmail.com.
Love that, you guys. That sounds so fun. I can't wait to hear those bonus episodes. That's fantastic. And thank you guys for being here. We always have great conversations, and we're looking forward to doing this with you guys more this season. We really appreciate your time and all the insight that you shared with us today. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. And to all of you, thank you so much for watching. This is season 5 of Beyond the Steps. Thank you, as always, to my fabulous friend and co-host, Melissa McDaniel Grisham. I love doing this with you every week. I'm so glad we're back. Beyond the Steps is here. Season 5 is here. You can watch us on YouTube and Facebook at Apollo Performance, at TP Dance Creations. Make sure you go back and check out this episode as well as all of our episodes, season 1 through 4. You won't be sorry. There's fantastic content here. And if you have an idea or a topic, or you want to be a guest, DM us on any of our social media platforms at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creation. Next week, we are going to be back on 10/18 with Gina Harris of Cheer Coach Academy about how to build successful cheer programs. We're going to talk about our cheer athletes, but again, this is an episode that's going to be able to apply to any athletic activity that you could possibly think of. So there's going to be some great insight there. We hope you tune in, do your homework, and until next time, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Everybody have an awesome weekend. See you soon.